Okay, we're live now. Still got a couple kids screaming in the background, but that kind of illustrates how what an overwhelming situation we're in right now. We're doing pre-call. We do pre-call for about an hour before we do it, and today was a 3-hour pre-call because we were trying to keep track of all the things going on and trying to understand like what is our position on this. There has been a new batch of Epstein files released, 3 million files that people are slowly going through, which I mean, I feel like everyone load up with your tinfoil hat because it turned out all the conspiracy theorists were right. There's even been more talk about pizza, the word pizza, the whole Pizzagate thing, which was obviously, aiming people in the wrong direction. But there's just so much to it, from the creation of subreddits and control. We knew Ghislaine Maxwell was one of the big moderators on Our Politics for years because when she went to jail, her account stopped working. So we had known that was a thing, but now they started it for that purpose. And we're learning more about 4chan and how it's evolved and how a lot of it seems like they were trying to create the right-wing pipeline and dehumanize people against other people. Like, it just seems like at its core, the goal of this was to turn people against people. As a person who was, at the right age, and they were pulling people from the same places, seeing 4chan screenshots or seeing the horrible things that were going on in different places, or even just like the recruitment on the World of Warcraft chat for Trump people. It's just, I've really seen it personally evolve, and seeing that there's some sort of like mastermind behind the whole thing. And it just really goes to show like what we were really fighting against. And it's also really important to show that Epstein was not the mastermind. He was a tool. And they're the mastermind people are still. We always talk about punishing the people who were on his client list, which we absolutely should. But I think that more importantly, we need to figure out, well, who is the boss in this? Who is pulling the strings? Because it even relates to all the stuff we're seeing with ICE right now, because this is coming from Trump and conservatism and an effort to control Americans. And that also relates, we're a COVID-safe group. It also relates into COVID safety and how we protect each other and why these guys don't care. Like when you think about the genocide, and no one seems to care about the babies getting killed or all this sort of stuff. It's like kind of all fits together in a really uncomfortable way.
The zone has definitely been flooded. Remember Bannon used to say, flood the zone?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Too.
There's so much to take away, because it just feels like at the same time Epstein is getting the last laugh because he kept records in his Gmail account of what everybody was doing with him that they weren't saying otherwise, so that if this event happened like it is right now, he's like the last like you can't deny that the purpose of this was blackmail, because we're literally seeing the blackmail material coming out right now and how everyone's reacting to it. And in other countries it's leading to resignations. Like a couple of MPs have resigned, a couple of people from different positions of power. And it's just really shocking. Whoa.
You mean other countries have shame?
Yeah, other countries care about that they care about pedophilia being bad because it's bad. And,
we don't have that here.
No, we apparently do not. And that's sort of a real eye-opening moment. Like when you think about what we're trying to do, and group called Organizing Your Better Tomorrow, you're trying to make things better, and it seems like all the big investments are only interested in making things worse. It's like how would you feel about being a right-wing grifter? We'll give you all the money you want. And you're like, no, I want to do left politics and like help people's lives be better. And they're like, maybe not that. And you're that's why we've relied on crowdsourcing and all those sorts of things. But then what do? They make it so that people can crowdsource. The Bernie movement was funded by getting change out of your couch, and now people don't have couches or living rooms. They had to
change.
They don't have change.
That's not change I can believe in.
No, it's definitely not. So it's and then just like more and more names keep popping up. You got 3 million documents to go through, and this isn't even the end of it. Just more and more people are just. I mean, we already knew Bill Gates was not a good dude, but man, the story about the Russian prostitutes giving him an STD and him needing to drug his wife with antibiotics is just like.
How weird is that? He's asking for advice on how to do it? Like how to spike his wife's drink or something?
Yeah. He was asking for the medication. Well, actually, okay. So what actually came out was Epstein made a record of the interaction in like a drafted email or an email he sent himself. So it's Epstein's whole breakdown of all the things that happened and went on, but it was like him making a record of the events rather than us finding the records of the event. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, so it's
so
just,
he kept a record of everything that's going on via emailing himself?
yeah, that's what it looks like. So he's emailing himself all these things that happened or what's going on. But then again, it just like goes into like, like they're also like, people are like, well, maybe these things aren't real. And then now we have people who are
Maybe they're drafts.
Well,
Maybe they're like email drafts.
Well, exactly. They're like, well, no, they're cross-referencing people who did email him, who did involve with whether or not it's child trafficking, but trafficking of women to him. And like it's like depending on the person, he was more clear on the language. Like he had coded language for some people, but not other people. And so it's just really like it's very clear that he was doing what we think he was doing. It's just to what end. And then it starts talking about really gross stuff. And this is different than the accusation. So you got two different bits of information. You have the emails from Epstein to other people or himself. Then you have the FBI, what are they called? The reports people called in. They had a line set up.
Oh, the tip line.
Yeah, the tip line. They had a tip line set up that people could call in. Now, the tip line stuff is less verified. Not saying it's not true. I'm not saying any of it's not true. I'm just saying that it is technically less verified because anyone could call that line and make a thing. It's kind of like talking about vaccines deaths from COVID because the system we use, anyone could go in. You have to go back and verify the information to make sure it's actually valid. So then the FBI didn't do that. So that's a huge problem. The FBI did not follow up with all these people. I don't think they followed up with anybody. And so so we don't know what among those stories is real, but there is an awful lot of similar but different stories, what we were saying in pre-call. Like when you're trying to like test the validity of something, you want things to be similar but not exactly the same, because these people are holding all these events, these horrible things are happening at these events, these horrible people being victimized at these events, but every event is going to be a little different. So to say if like multiple people had all exactly the same stories, you'd be like, okay, that may not be true because they're all saying exactly the same thing, but we're at different events. That's weird. But each story is just different enough to make me think that there's a lot of validity to it and that the complaints are very valid because, if you're looking at it from that perspective, it just has that, like, things are different enough from story to story that it's possible that these are all organic, tips coming in from people who really went through this stuff. And it seems like, there was a lot of, like, people were murdered. There was murders along the way. They talk about this stuff like on both ends. And it's pretty obvious that Epstein was involved with murdering people because he talks about they had this code where he goes, whoops, whoops, and it's code for somebody dying. Like accidentally. Whoops. That was his line in the thing. So whenever they were saying they were going to off somebody, and then at one point their emails where she's like, the person's like, I give you permission to kill this person. Like, it gets, some of these emails are really, really specific. Like I've looked at way too many people going through these. It's just kind of everywhere. And it is a lot. And it's like, I think it's really important to like understand the depth of what a problem this is, because we have this like toxic masculinity thing from the right-wing pipeline with creators like Andrew Tate and those types of losers who want to push this like you're not being man enough. And if you remember, about 10 years ago, there was a lot of push that like, what's wrong with our generation of men? They're not tough enough. They're not the thing. And that was getting forced into young men's brains like all the time. Like, look at what a bunch of wusses they're being, or whatever phrase you want to leave for them not being good enough. Woke, right? Whatever is woke is bad. And it led to this toxic masculinity because there's this whole industry of men now who are fed into this thing, and it's this pipeline that was created from 4chan. And it seems like, if you've ever been on, I personally have not spent a lot of time on 4chan because I am aware of what a bad place it was and is, and things like child abuse material would get passed around there. Things like dehumanizing, torture stuff, all this sort of stuff. It all feeds that dehumanization sort of thing. And also, if you're creating a secret ring of pedophiles, you need people on to come and support your pedophilia. So it seems like they were using these things as tools to like turn people out into these terrible people. It's like everyone has the potential to be good or bad depending on what they're fed, information wise, and they were giving people the worst possible thing and then making jokes about it and further dehumanizing all these things. And then now I can't help but feel that there's been this, it seems like, and maybe I've been in the whole like catch all these predators thing the whole time, so I'm always paying attention to when predators get caught. And we talk a lot about right-wing men in their like mid-20s right now getting caught with child abuse material, and I can't help but feel that there's a direct correlation between things like 4chan and what Jeffrey Epstein, who was participating in that behavior, was actually doing, because they were basically trying to normalize this as a thing in general. And we now have this huge, we're busting all these people, and you're like, are we busting them because we've gotten better at busting them, which we have actually technically, or are we busting them because now there's more of them because these groups have been feeding it into, and if you were like a country, let's say, whether it be Russia or Israel, and you need to kill children or kill people, and you need people to be on your side, sometimes making them just not care about it is the same thing. And I think that's a big reason why we talk about COVID killing kids, and people are like, I don't care.
People become desensitized.
Right. They've desensitized to the idea, so they're no longer like in this realm of like the whole point of it is losing your humanity. Because that's the thing I would say, like we talk about rights and human rights and all sorts of stuff, and I think that like when we talked about this on the show, like Terry, who's with us as hi Terry, but it's getting a little late, so I know she can't stay too long. But she was alive when women couldn't, like I was alive when women couldn't have their own bank accounts and credit cards. Like you had to have a man. Like that was in the 1980s. So since the 1980s to the 2000s, we gained this like range of rights and freedoms and potential to like coexist. Like that was really, really new. Like I don't think people realize how new it was. And it seems like that was all of this has been a push to push people away from that and going back to, removing no fault marriages and
not only could women not get credit cards, they couldn't get mortgages.
Right. And there's a thing right now going on where women are saying their credit card limits are being reduced.
Really?
Yeah, there's a thing going on where a lot of women are talking about their credit card things. So instead of having like $5,000 to make a run for it at a given moment, that has been taken from them. They no longer have that credit.
That's scary.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like weird stuff going on with that, where it's like moving a direction, which that means the creditors are taking part in that. The actual credit card companies are participating and trying to like strip rights away from people by making it so that they have less freedom to like access to capital. Because the less access to capital, go ahead.
I never watched The Handmaid's Tale on TV, but I read the book, and I also read the sequel called The Testaments, where they focus on Aunt Lydia, who was the leader of the indoctrination of the handmaids. And in the before time, she was a judge. She was a very intelligent, very high prestige woman. And I remember one day she went to go use her credit card, and she couldn't use it anymore. And within days, everything changed.
Right. So
I don't remember them showing that in the show, actually, that she was a judge.
They are showing that?
I don't remember them showing that she was a judge.
Yeah, maybe not. I've never watched the TV show, but the books are interesting.
Yeah, I like that backstory. It gives that character more color.
Well, think about also these stories that get funded and get things. You got Handmaid's Tale, you got Man in the Iron Tower, or whatever it's called, where like Hitler won and the Nazis won. You have all this like pro-Nazi, pro-oppression, pro-less human rights material, and then there's always someone fighting back, but those things are getting greenlit because it's driving a certain type of like feeling into society. Like the control is much more complicated than just this thing, because you're talking about like, was Jeffrey Epstein, most importantly, besides obviously a horrible pedophile, is he was a financier. So he had access to all this money, and he could tell money people where to spend their money. And so you've now created this thing where they spend money on things. It's kind of like there's this thing about they talk about with rap music, where the rap music that is less intelligent, that is more like get money, chase whatever, blah blah, just kind of just like nonsense, low, like they're not like Tupac level of like making you think and making you feel. The reason that those get funded by white execs is because it funds like the I don't know how to say this. It doesn't advance black culture. It does the opposite. It reverts.
That's for sure.
Yeah, so this is the thing that's been talked about heavily.
Gotta slap my bitch up is one of the lyrics I remember.
Yeah, I don't think I'm allowed to say that, but yes, exactly. So it's like whatever kind of de-evolves that presence is the thing that gets funded, and so that's sort of like the really scary thing. Now, as somebody who's trying to like make it into Hollywood at one point, was trying to pitch scripts around the city, you know, you couldn't help but feel that there was this like secret code I wasn't saying. Like, I'm not saying it's pedophilia, but it's something. There was something that I was missing, that I didn't hit the notes. Like, I wanted to humanize people and make things feel better and like give more empathy towards a situation, and they're like, yeah, we don't fund
You're
that.
missing the zeitgeist of the times.
Right, yeah. If I had been like, we're going to do something really horrible, and it's going to dehumanize all these people, and it's going to make everyone hate everybody, and they would have been like, great, here's the money you need to make.
Sign right here, sir.
Yeah, exactly. That seems to be like a much more like tied to the thing where it's sort of like, you know, if you actually want to make things better or improve people's lives, then you're not going to get funding. You're going to get slandered. Because you're antithetical to what they want to achieve. They have a goal, and they have this much larger goal, and it has to do with teaching people to dehumanize each other. And it actually really goes, if you think about it, it really goes into like a more interesting, you know, even bigger issue with like labor, because that also keeps people from unionizing. It also fits into the whole, you know, don't talk about how much you work. You make more than them. That's good. Don't come together and try to get more money.
Don't come together. It's all about anti-solidarity. That's why American culture is so hyper-individualized.
Right. And
I think that
hyper-individualism was something we were moving away from, like in the post 9/11 area, like, you know what I mean, like, or I'd say pre 9/11. Actually, we were moving towards less individualism and more like community, making it better, working together, eradicating diseases, changing all this stuff. And then 9/11 happened, and it was just used to be such a clamp down on society in every direction, where you were constantly like, are you a ISIS sleeper cell? You know, it's turning people against each other because they're telling everybody that, oh, they're all lying about who they are, and here's another, you know, ISIS sleeper cell attacking us, and you can't trust your Muslim neighbors, or you can't trust your non-Christian neighbors, or you can't trust your...
What was the one thing that George W. Bush said we could do at a time? I never forgave him for this. You know, when everybody wanted to come together, something had happened, and people wanted to come together like the World War II generation did. And Bush told us to go shopping.
Go to Disney World. Go shopping.
Yeah, spend money. Be a consumer.
Yeah. That was the weirdest thing, but it was absolutely their sentiment.
Yeah, and it killed the moment again.
Yeah. Every time there's something like, every time there's something that happens that brings people together and makes us think, you know, more than just about ourselves and our future, there's always something that tears it down. Or, well, you know,
look at COVID. Look at COVID. We had the biggest expansion of the welfare state, which is not a bad thing, to help people ever. We could have built on that and like made things improve. The lockdowns actually worked. Working from home works. Like, the ocean got cleaner, the sky got better, and then now they've tried to make every reason under the sun while stopping. Like, I don't know if you've heard this, there was a study they said on how the lockdowns affected the moon, and that the lockdowns hurt the moon. You're like, well, there wasn't as much chemical pollution, so the moon did something different. And you're like, well, shouldn't it be doing the thing without the chemical pollution as it's normal? Why are we... Yeah. What, isn't that the right
COVID,
thing?
That was another inflection point where people could have come together, and I was really hopeful at the very beginning, you know, the old banging of the pots and pans and I protect you, you protect me, but we can't have any of that.
Yeah, as soon as well, they started clamping down the thing, they made it harder. I remember exactly what happened because I was part of the group fighting for the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, and at the beginning, like from the PUA, and I pay tax on it, so I feel bad. Me and my wife got like 30 grand from that. Like we got an crazy amount of money. We paid taxes on it. We did everything right. We did everything, but everything was legit. It was like I bought my computer. It like gave us a ton of like help. It definitely lifted me up out of poverty momentarily, pretty intensely. And I was trying to teach people how to get it themselves, and it was hard. It was not easy to get online. But as the pandemic progressed, it became harder and harder to get access to the money. And so it was like eventually that was like the thing, you know, the clamps they put on people to make them like, oh no, I got to get back to work because I'm going to get evicted. I don't have evicted protection. I can't pay my bills because but the money was there, but people couldn't access it. And then it went in the same sort of line of thinking of when, you know, Brownstone and all those human piles of filth came out with their, you know, lockdowns are killing people. The vaccines are killing people. Anything to try to stop COVID. Cleaning the air is killing people. You know, learning loss. The dumbest shit ever because the whole basis on that whole argument was that COVID in itself is not dangerous. That was the whole basis
cut childhood
of the argument.
poverty in half.
Yeah.
And then just turned it back. Just
right.
Forget it. We're not doing that.
Yeah. So it really feels like the poverty and the pain is the point. And then they convince people with things like they tell you, well, when the government has too much debt and it spends too much money, that makes your dollar worth less. So if we give you too much money, then the money we give you doesn't go as far. That's not true. That's not true. It's never been true. The opposite is true. The less money they spend, the less value of the money because corporations have to maintain profit margins. And if you put less money into the system, they have to charge more from individual people in order to create the same profit. That's why right now, rich people are driving most of the economy because things have gotten so expensive that they're the only people who can buy anything. But as long as you're meeting that market and they're meeting the profit returns.
This is not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, but they don't care. They're only thinking one quarter at a time. And their brains are all cooked from COVID. That's the other thing. You know, I'm trying to explain to people how, like, the different vaccines we used around the world had different levels of protection. And in America, specifically, the ones that we prioritized had no protection for your brain. So everyone got their brains cooked. Not to mention, the immune response from the vaccines is enough cytokines to have the same effect. So it's sort of like...
Yeah, those are very inflammatory vaccines.
What's that?
They're very inflammatory vaccines.
Yeah, exactly. And inflammatory is code for they force your body to release a lot of cytokines, and those rotate to your brain. They get into your brain. Circulate is the correct word. They circulate to your brain, and they cause all kinds of problems. You know, that's why I was like, hey, why don't we just see what this does first before we're like in a big rush? But the whole point was they needed something to end everything as fast as possible because we were gaining class solidarity.
They needed us to get back to normal.
Terrified of that. They are terrified of that.
Yeah, they are terrified of that. They should be. They should be.
I remember people were saying, like, you know, I'm thinking about what's really important. People were like, coming up with new hobbies to do and making bread and all this different stuff. No, we can't have any of that.
No, we don't want you to explore life and enjoy yourself, find joy in like basic stuff. You can't even know that's an option. And that's like where we're all like really strictly tied into now. And it turns out it's all coming from these super powerful groups that are all funded by the same people who are only interested in kind of like building that toxicity up, you know?
Yeah. It's weird that people were so just sort of in a hurry to just forget all that, you know, to forget that part of it. I know how the pandemic itself and the refrigerator trucks.
Yeah,
and,
I was going to say the freezer trucks were a little much for people. I think that was that was the thing where we saw the bodies of people piling up.
Yeah.
And people were like, "Oh my God, that could be me." And you're like, "Yeah, that absolutely could be you, or it could be the problem is we saw the people dying. We didn't really spend enough time looking at all the people who didn't die but were really fucked up. You know, we didn't.
That is. It's just, and then the old people, right? Who don't matter, they would have died anyway.
Oh God, I find that so gross. Our elders are so important in society because they teach us how to avoid all the mistakes that they made, and that's a big reason capitalism. And you see it in black communities where we have the high prison system. because it's like a school, they call the school to prison pipeline, and a big portion of that is if you have the dads in jail or one of the parents missing or whatever you can do to put the kid out in a place where they'll get into trouble, have less guidance, they're more likely to make like simple mistakes, and they're more likely to fall into the prison pipeline system. And so it's sort of like how we manipulate. There's even a freeway in Los Angeles that's constantly under construction, and it's between the place people work and the place people live and go to school. So in order for the parents to get home, they have to drive through traffic. It takes about 2 hours, and their kid has been out of school since 3 o'clock. So that gives their kid like 5 hours of unsupervised to get into all kinds of trouble. And so this is part, like, so having that piece of your freeway that you drive on that always has construction and never gets fixed is part of the school to prison pipeline. Like, people don't understand that. It's part of the reason it's not fixed is because if the parents are away for their kids for a longer period of time, they're more likely to get into some sort of infraction, problem with the system, drugs, whatever it is, because they're unsupervised. And if you make that a single parent, then they're even more likely to be unsupervised, and they're more likely to be in poverty. The more likely you are to be unsupervised, the more likely to be in poverty, the more likely you are to enter into the system. And that's free labor in prisons.
Because your single parent's probably going to have multiple jobs.
Right, exactly. Even more unsupervised.
And the way that we allocate property taxes, too, doesn't help the situation.
No, yeah, it's so, like, people who work there and live there means the property taxes for the working is going to not where the living is. So that's
Where
another
people
reason
get
commuting
less
is
resources.
bullshit. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's so because we were talking about racism in the system, and institutionalized racism, and I don't even think this is necessarily that. This is like a whole other level of racism that is in the system. It is systemic. It is institutionalized, but it's like it's like invisible. It's like invisible racism because you can't. I mean, you're driving on the freeway traffic. Would you think that this is helping put kids in jail? Apparently, I do. But, I mean, most people aren't going to make that connection. Because I've always been like, oh, this thing won't get fixed. Well, where do the people work and where do the kids go to school? Well, the kids are on that side of the traffic, and the work is on that side of the traffic. And you're like, okay, so what do the kids do in that time? They get into trouble. And you're right. We police those kids harder than ever, don't we? So, like, the less trouble you get in, the less infraction, the more trouble. And like, oh, so will they get multiple infractions and they're poor? So are they stealing food or getting into trouble or just whatever it is? You're just getting people into like gangs and drugs. And so this is it's either that or they go into the military. Those are like the options. I'll never forget that Republican saying. I don't remember who it was when they were lowering the PUA from 600 to 300. And they said, well, we can't give people that much or they won't join the military.
Somebody really said that?
Yeah, someone really said that. I don't remember who said it, but I remember it very vividly being like, be careful. I remember it very vividly when it was happening because I was in the midst of all that drama. It was before we made OFAB-T. I hadn't made my Twitter account yet or my long COVID articles. We were kind of, when this was going on and we weren't getting the support, like we were, like when pandemic started, I was like writing these huge, how to restart the society structured plans. Like I was writing these things, or like these huge things. And I could see the ability for us to like really change the world was kind of like at our right everything. And I talk a lot about Medicare for All and my role in getting the movement started, but it kind of got handed over to other groups because that's just not what I do. I just sort of like get the idea out there, pushed it to the agenda. Because the idea was, originally Medicare for All, was we needed something to keep the Bernie movement going. It was kind of sounded like Bernie's 2016 platform. He'd supported it in the past, but it wasn't really going anywhere or doing anything at the time. Should have called it Medicaid for All, but we didn't. Anyways, the point is that what the plan was that we were going to start these state groups, and the state groups were going to push for Medicare for All at a state level in order to build a desire or an appetite for it. Now, the states have no way to pass single-payer health care unless they get permission, or what are they called, waivers from the federal government to spend Medicare and Medicaid money on this program. If they get the waivers to spend Medicare and Medicaid money on this program, then maybe a couple of states can pull it off. The problem is, you start handing out waivers to not spend Medicare and Medicaid money where it's federally mandated to go, then red states are going to come in with their waivers and then make it so there's no Medicare and Medicaid at all. And they're already very limited.
Yeah, in Florida, pretty much done it.
Right. And so that's the fundamental problem with it. The federal government has unlimited spending. It can spend as much as it wants. It doesn't need taxation in order to pay for things. States and counties require taxation or federal assistance in order to pay for things. That's why the federal government can write a check for however amount of money, and it doesn't actually affect anything negatively because that's just how we've set up finance in our country. A lot of people will be like, no, Don, it's more complicated than that. And of course it's more complicated than that, but basically at its fundamental core, that is essentially what's going on. And actually, we're kind of being proven right recently, because we used to talk a lot about how when Trump started cutting off funding to all these big groups that distributed money around the world, we were talking a lot about soft power, right? And soft power is an idea of how you keep the dollar valuable by keeping it a primary used currency in all these foreign entities. You keep a premium on the dollar so that the dollar is always valuable, and then that makes people want the dollar. Then the dollar becomes a form of trade, and then the dollar has power. It's not about limiting its spending, it's about spending more. The more you spend, the more money comes back to you. And there's also a concept called the velocity of money, where the more a dollar is spent, the more value it has. So the more dollars that are out being spent multiple times, the more valuable the dollar is. So if you
Which is another reason why it's really inefficient to have a bunch of billionaires hoarding it like dragons, because they ain't spending it.
Yeah, or the offshore accounts, super bad, because it's not being respent. It makes money less valuable. So
if you give money to poor people, they're going to spend the money, and that helps the economy.
Right. Giving money to poor people is good for the economy. And small businesses.
Yeah.
Which
economy all right.
Which are poor people by corporate standards. That was sad. I shouldn't have laughed. So it's just kind of like comes back around, all the different ways that we're seeing that right now in action, because the dollar is kind of crumbling at the moment, and it's because we stopped spending enough money. It wasn't because of, this is what austerity does. It's like, and all these right wingers have this idea where well, if we don't have the money for that. Yes, we do have the money for that. You don't have the stomach for it. You don't think there's an appetite. And as long as you keep the American public convinced that it's not possible because America doesn't have enough money, the billionaires can keep hoarding cash. But the problem is that it just makes everything more expensive. That's the problem. The less the dollar is worth, the more expensive everything becomes, because they have to manage these profit margins. It is actually pretty simple. And like other countries like the IMF, and they do make it more complicated in how it actually works on a global scale. But generally speaking, it's all like numbers and spreadsheets. You just take the 10,000 in the spreadsheet and move it to that spreadsheet, and now you have $10,000 to pull out of the bank account. That's how it works. And we can argue it should work differently. We can argue whatever you want to argue. But at the end of the day, that is fundamentally how our financial system works in America. And so we're seeing that really play out. And what the hell is my point? We're kind of vindicated on explaining that about a year ago when this was all starting. I was explaining it, and people were like, Don, I don't think that's how it works. But now it's happened. But they say, but it was the COVID spending. It was the lockdowns. It was the whatever good thing we had to do was fundamentally the problem.
So much more money, yeah.
So, and what's really wild about it too is it's about pain and creating pain for the public, because when you distribute money through the people, the corporations made more money than ever before. And that was what really happened with inflation under Biden, is that they had all this money going into the system from people making the dollar more valuable, increasing profits, and then they cut off all that money without a replacement yet, because people hadn't started working again yet. You needed more of a gap. There's a big gap between when they were giving.
Because then profits are going to go down, and that cannot happen.
That makes prices go up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing about there. I always talk about inflation. Like inflation is controlled entirely by corporations. It has nothing to do. I mean, technically, interest rates have a little bit to do with it, but not as much as corporate profits. And that's the other thing they don't want people to understand. They want people to think that like inflation is just a thing that happens. It's just a thing that happens. It raises at 3%, and you're like, why is the rate of inflation exactly the same as the rate of profit promised to investors by these corporations? It's the same number, 3 to 5%. They promise the increase in profits. They convince the public that this is just something that happens, but really they're creating an appetite to meet the demands made to their investors. And so, like, people don't really...
People some complicated mumbo jumbo that the Fed does.
Right, and the Fed only controls interest rates and the flow of capital when you want to borrow large amounts of it. But a lot of these banks can loan out their own money that they've also... There's so many ways for them to get money. They actually have that new system for, like, we're not going to see banks go under anymore because they've created that system where banks can get just unlimited capital from the Treasury through this new system. And it's being... Yeah, it's being used in like the numbers are really scary. Like, especially it was around December, we were watching the banks almost collapse, but instead they were able to just reach into this new fund of money, and it's like billions and billions of dollars, basically however much money they want, and that not letting those banks collapse and giving them access to that money probably is worse than letting them collapse. Like
I would agree,
because that money should be pushed into this, like, this is, and at the end of the day, I know we're way off because we're not talking about ICE or we're not talking about any of this stuff because it's just everything going on is so much. We're kind of in a weird economic discussion, but it all goes into each other because you're talking about how do we distribute currency, and all of this is inundated to make it impossible for us to agree on how any of this works so that we can get a majority to create change. As long as this whole bullshit system keeps making the capitalist class more money, then enough people will think that they can get in the lottery too, and maybe they'll be a billionaire if something goes their way, and so they will support that. And so they're really ruling everything with a what's it called when you have the largest number but it's not an actual majority? It's called plurality. Thank you, Terry. And so they're ruling everything with the plurality, but all they have to do is keep us disagreeing on what is the right answer, because they're promising, I'm not sitting here promising I might make you a billionaire. I can't do that. I don't have that ability, but these guys can give you all the empty promises in the world because you see it happen on the stock market. You see it happen with the companies people sell. You see it happen, but is that even real? Are we watching just rich people playing games with their money, making it seem like they're like, it's like the carrot. It's like the carrot at the end of the stick, and that's...
We stopped, being an economy that produces things, and everything became that we financialized our economy. It became an economy of Wall Street spitting money out of nothing. That's all we've done for decades, spin money out of nothing.
Right, and the problem with that is that creating infinite growth on a finite system, right? So you're in this,
yeah. And that is, economics is not a science, because any legitimate science that had a model that was based on infinite growth would get laughed out of their university. It doesn't work that way.
But when you look at it,
economics.
But when you look at it quarterly, it stops being in the growth cycle. And I feel like all this stuff that's going on, all of this stuff with all of this, you thought that this was all about, I'm going to say something kind of horrific. You thought this was all about just money and controlling capital and controlling thing. And it turns out it's not about the money. It's people who already have money using it to control what appears to be an elite pedophile ring.
Oh, God. And we're back to that.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's all full circle with everything we're learning. You got to understand how, like, what are these people really protecting and what are you really fighting? It's like, we're really out here, we're a group called Organizing for Better Tomorrow, trying to create change in an environment, and you got to really realize what you're up against. And it felt like, you're up against big money, and how do we access the capital, and how can we do something that combats that, and how do we get around the algorithms and the bots and all those things. And, we have a pretty decent plan for doing that, but finding someone who is willing to finance that, like, public good, like who is financing public good? I mean, the one person I'll say who's probably doing is Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. It's actually all the ex-wives, right? You got Melinda Gates, right? They're kind of trying to fund public good. They sort of are, at least. I'll give them that. So like you got these women, who have access to billions, who are funding public good. Even we're watching this thing. We were reading about the America Saudi Arabia biotech conference where they're trying to bridge together Saudi Arabia and talk about greater public health. Taking Saudi money is not something I would ideally do. You look at this, but here's a woman, a princess in their thing, trying to use their money for public good. It does seem like there's a direct correlation between like public good and public harm. That it's like the men are public harm and the women are public benefit. It just seems like, I hate to generalize it so much, but I actually don't. I take that back. I don't hate it at all because it makes total sense. You have the nurturers versus the destroyers, and we're watching them only know how to destroy, and it's just we've lost track. Like nurturing is woke apparently, and you're not a cool, strong man if you
Yeah, and the nurturing professions are the ones generally with lower pay and lower status. Teachers, nurses, daycare, home care, all that stuff. That's female work, and they don't get paid enough.
Right.
We have a completely inverted system.
Yeah, we do.
In that regard.
Yeah. And this is sort of like what we need to do is nurture and fund like making things better, improving quality of life, improving like the human benefit. And I just feel like we've lost sight of that completely, and then and then the problem is you have men looking at other men being like, well, how am I supposed to be? And they're setting a horrible precedent on how we should do things. Like we should be more compassionate, more caring, and more understanding, and more of the thing. And you might be like, well, Dawn, you could be more compassionate and understanding on social media, and you're like, it's one thing at a time. But one thing at a time.
Did you know that the Trump administration wants to make a law so that you can pay home care workers even less than they already make?
So that's what they're doing in Florida, right?
Wow.
Yeah, probably. But no, they want to do it nationwide. And that's one of the hardest jobs in the world, honestly. And if you want to throw some structural racism in, most of the time it's people of color that do it.
Yeah.
Shock. Or single mothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't talk about this, but you might have seen that story from Florida with the Haitians that are losing their protected status, and
oh God, yeah.
And those elderly people were asking to hide them. Did you see that?
I didn't see that. What's going on?
They were asking to hide their healthcare workers, like they're the people that were helping them, their caregivers.
Oh my God. Yeah, there are a lot of Haitians that would do that work. I can see it.
Yeah.
And they're good at it.
Yeah.
Because their culture is more of caring for one another than ours is.
Well, that's a big reason they're like, well, if you're going to come, we have to like break that culture of wanting to help people. We have to make you hungry and desperate. And it used to be like, bring me your tired, bring me your whatever. It's like, well, let's make them tired. Let's make them like that. How about that? I think that's a better way. We should make them broken. And I feel like that's the whole thing, right? They want workers to accept less pay, accept less protections, less health care, more sick kids, more just generally like worse things across the board. And they just want people to learn how to accept that. And that I feel like is like when we're saying, hey, at Organizing Better Tomorrow, we want to change that. We're trying to get, hey, here's a good one. Long COVID is never going away. That's something that a lot of people in the long COVID community were pushing an article about that recently. That's a bunch of bullshit. It's a bunch of bullshit. Oh, it's never going away. We can't do anything about it. Why is it that we have recoveries happen? Like for the last 3 years, we've been helping people recover from long COVID one way or another. A lot of times just with Novavax, sometimes with like more complicated things like, just how to use supplements properly. And people will always argue over the thing, even though human error is a huge issue. You buy cheap supplements, you get cheap responses. You buy too many supplements, you overwhelm your system. If you don't do the right supplements, you're not feeding your body the things it needs. Like we have had people who have had recoveries from everything from MECFS to POTS to just everything from a variety of ways. And yet when these things are successful, all these people who spend all this time talking about long COVID, they don't talk about it. They don't talk about how, like, well, a lot of people have a positive reaction from Novavax. Like, who talks about that? Who talks about how many recoveries we've seen just from Novavax alone? We've seen tons. Some people use it as they're like, okay, I'm excited to get another one. I'm going to recover a little more like I did last time. That should be every single person with long COVID should know that information. And yet, all these people who say they care about long COVID and say they care about all these people don't share that information with anyone. They don't tell people. They don't, like, I had talking to somebody the other day who was going through recovery. They were attributing to one thing, but they had also gotten a bunch of Novavax. So all these things working together why aren't we telling? If this is something we have seen work, why are people denying it? Because they don't want to make things better. It's the same reason that's perpetuating the long COVID isn't going away. We're going to have to deal with this forever. Well, we are going to have to deal with this forever. But the fact that it can't go away and we can't do something about it is the wrong attitude to have. That is perpetuating the problem and teaching people to accept the problem as reality. You're teaching people, because what is that really going to lead to? More suicides.
Yeah.
More fucking suicides, more people killing themselves because they're being told there's no solution, there's no way to make it better, we don't know what's wrong with you. That's bullshit. We do know what's wrong with these people. They're experiencing severe dysfunction. Like, just that alone is like a huge start to getting people on recovery. Because you're like, well, your body's in dysfunction. Well, why is it in dysfunction? Well, it could be persistence, it could be a lot of other things, but you want to basically get your system. That's the point of taking all these supplements, is to get yourself as functional as possible. If you're dysfunctional, right, why not try to make yourself functional? That starts a conversation. Well, how do I make myself more functional? What is wrong? What is going on? Then you go to the specific symptoms, specific things going on, and then you try to work it out. I mean, I can't help but feel like we spent like 3 years explaining to people, like fighting with the leadership of every long COVID group. And I know everyone in this call should remember, you were all here, that fighting with every long COVID group about the reality that persistence was driving this disease. And then now everyone is like, oh yeah, this is the normal thing. But it's like, how hard was that to get there, to get people to see that, and then to understand that that changes how you would approach your treatment regimen. How would you approach recovery and getting back into function? Just having that little bit of information. Why does Novavax work? Novavax increases the breadth of your antibodies that already exist in your body, so it makes your immune system better at fighting persistent virus. What is persistent virus? Persistent virus is virus that is mutated in your body beyond the range of your initial immune response. These are simple ideas. They are not complicated. When people understand what is going on, it gives us a mechanism to start fighting and treating it. If we are constantly telling people that these things only work sometimes, blah, 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 you're killing people. You're fucking killing people. Whether it be by suicide or by COVID or an opportunistic pathogen, or just in general, you're putting a death sentence on that person so that people will be less likely to help them. You're telling people that these people with long COVID, well, we don't have a treatment and we don't know what's wrong. We do have a treatment. We do know what's wrong. You got to stop saying that. It's absolutely not true. So when you perpetuate this idea, like long COVID is never going away and we're going to be dealing with this forever, that's a bunch of perpetuating the worst possible outcome bullshit. We need to do more. We need to take the stuff that's worked and popularize it. We still got people, total clowns, running around saying that nasal sprays don't work for prevention. This guy said that every study, and ChatGPT can tell these studies are bad. Like, just like, what is he, on RFK's team? Like, they're saying every single study that went through every single regulatory process in every single country that went through every single person is all bullshit. How is that even possible? How is that even a thing? Like, we can't, like, are you saying nasal irrigation doesn't work? Are you saying that you can't, like, do you understand the mechanism for how COVID infects your sinus cavity? How it enters your mucosa through your nose? Like, do you understand, like, there's little hair-like cell structures on the tip of that, and it takes COVID, like, 2 to 3 hours to infect those cells, and in those 2 to 3 hours, you can use a nasal spray, nasal irrigation, anything possible to help fight that. You're saying that all of that information is faked and bogus? Like, what is really wrong with these people? Like, what is the benefit that they get about lying to people about what is the best way to protect them other than more COVID infections? Because I'll tell you what, one thing that we do not as a group here, we do not profit from COVID infections. I don't sell treatments. I don't have Novavax stock. I don't have, like, the goal is prevention so people aren't sick. And we have all these people who put on this character like they're the same thing, but all they do is create harm. All they do is mislead people about the science. All they do is work around. Like, there's no difference between people who say nasal sprays don't work and Novavax doesn't help long COVID as the brownstone people who push against everything being fake. It has the same outcome. Makes me very angry. And it's not even about crediting me for like, oh, Dawn, you figured it out. No, it's not about, I'm never going to get the credit that maybe I do or don't deserve. I'm never going to get it. It's never going to happen. It's not about that. It's about people understanding that there's something to live for, that there's something to hope. There is good outcomes. There are people working on this, trying to figure it out for them. And it seems like the only people who really get the attention are the people that are most interested in profiting off of harm and death. You know? And I just feel like it's gone completely missed in the community, and it's so harmful and ugly. It's ugly. And then when you look at how is that not any different than you got these Epstein and all these pedos running this full court press against reality to try to control and protect their pedo proclivities, and how are you... when we have all of the money and all of the influence against us, and if you're working against positive influence, how are you not just a part of this secret pedo ring that's trying to control and influence people if you have the same goals? Like, if you're not working for the people power or people coming together and standing together and having solidarity, if you aren't a part of that, how are you not a part of the other thing? Because I feel like there's a saying, and Terry, maybe you want to correct me on this, but it comes down to that the idea is that if you are like if you won't stand up for the oppressed group, then you are part of the oppressor. So that's the general idea, right? Like, if you won't stand up for the oppressed group.
That's not the exact statement, but yeah, it is the general idea.
General idea. So if you're not working together with the people who want to work together to create power against basically unlimited money and influence of the super elite, then how are you not just a part of the super elite's plan? Like, if their goal is oppressing us, and you're not standing together with the other oppressed against those people, and you're actually working against the oppressed people to make them further oppressed, how are you not just taking sides with this super elite pedophile ring?
What do you call a person who's sitting at a table with 5 Nazis?
Fucking Nazi.
A Nazi.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from all this, whether it be ICE or Epstein or Trump or any of this stuff going on, is like the key here is solidarity, right? And if we can't find solidarity with each other, then you're working against the interests of the people. Like, if you
and
go
they're
out
terrified of solidarity. They're terrified of our solidarity, and that's because they know it can work.
Yeah, we don't even need a majority, too. We only need a plurality. Because they have everyone so broken up into other groups, that works against them, too, because only so many people agree with them fully in the first place. They just need everyone broken up into groups smaller than their group. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't beat it. You don't need 51%. You actually need, like, 34% or something.
And that's why I'm loving the people of Minneapolis right now, because it seems like they get that.
Yeah, they do. Oh, have you seen what's happening in LA?
Mm.
Oh my God. They have ICE pin. They like are full blown, like, I don't even know how to say it. They had ICE pinned in their facility. Basically, they had ICE. They have completely pinned. They have like trash cans and like dumpsters and like all kinds of stuff blocking them in. And I've never seen what is happening in LA makes Minneapolis look like polite.
And they're so and they call it domestic terrorism.
The only domestic terrorism right now is coming from our federal government.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like they're, because the thing is, at the end of the day, the federal government is breaking the law. The federal government is not following the law as it stands. They're saying you don't have constitutional rights. They're saying they don't need warrants. They're saying just on and on. They're breaking the law. They're the ones in the wrong. And people have a right to enforce their rights. And they can try to label it whatever they want. But this is why they know. I don't know if you've seen today, Trump is having a full court press on elections and how Republicans should take over elections in every state. And you're like, that's not going to happen. You don't have the manpower, you don't have the people, you don't have the appetite, and then that's when the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment, which we're dangerously close to. The Second Amendment protecting the First Amendment, which is like, I don't know.
What was Tulsi doing in Georgia?
They were basically taking ballots from the 2000 election, physical hard copies of the 2000 election, and trying to prove that the physical ballots don't match the digital accounts. So
The
they
2000
were.
election?
What's that?
The 2000 election?
2020. Sorry, I always called 2020 2000 for some reason, just because my brain don't work right at times. So yeah, so they're basically auditing the previous election to try and see if it didn't match the results of the digital results
With the FBI.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Election integrity is really complicated, and we don't have a lot of it. It's a big problem. And I think that, like, on one hand, we should have more federal oversight into elections to make sure that they're all being done properly and fairly, right? This is not that. So I feel like on one hand, we should have more federal oversight, and there should be more protected in a way that actually protects people's rights. But these guys are only interested.
Voter suppression.
I don't know. Based on what they were going for and doing, voter suppression isn't really on the agenda yet. That's why they need the voter rolls, but even then, that's not really enough. They need access to digital, online voter rolls. There are ways to do that. I'm not going to explain it on the show because I don't want to tell them how to do it, but there are ways to do that.
It's still fishy, and like, what, just to like try to create some result that he wants?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, he's insane. He's an insane dictator. He's trying to be a dictator.
Yeah, but also that position that she has is another thing that was created after 9/11. That was just like ICE and DHS. The position that Tulsi has, DNI, was not there. That was another.
Now, is this explicitly Patriot Act stuff, or there was a secondary bill that created ICE? ICE was not creating the Patriot Act; it was created with like another DHS project or something, right? Because you're looking at basically, we need to take apart the entire infrastructure. It's all the.
They need to dismantle the war on terror.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, it's like the war on terror and the war on drugs. Like both of those things need to be dismantled because they don't serve the purpose they claim to serve. They're really more about oppressing people.
Yeah. And that was another one. The DNI was also so that the agencies could speak to one another, because Bush claimed after 9/11 that they weren't, even though he had a presidential daily brief, which are created by the DNI now, but they used to be, I think they were created by the leader of the CIA before. And there was one given to him in the summer before 9/11 saying that bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S. And he was like, oh, well, you covered your ass. You can leave now. To the, I think it was the CIA director. I don't know if you remember, Terry. But, yeah, that position of DNI was created, I think, in 2004. It was after DHS. But, yeah, it's another part of the war on terror. And I don't know that I don't know what benefits it's really reaped.
The postmortem said that the agencies weren't coordinating together and they needed to do something. And
yeah, when really they did have the.
Yeah, of course. How are these agencies not talking to each other? That's the most ridiculous. I've always looked back on that. I was kind of young still. I was like 18 when this was 19 when this was going on. I was kind of living a different part of my life, but I remember hearing this and be like, how is these agencies not speaking to each other? They can just get on the phone with each other. Like, oh, well, you're not legally allowed to talk to each other. And I'm like, the fuck they aren't. They all give briefings to the government and different agencies all the time. Like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
But,
and the first guy they gave that job to was John Negroponte.
Oh, great.
Do you remember that?
No.
He was the first one. He like basically lied to Congress about abuses of humanitarian abuses. I think it was in Honduras when he was down there in the 80s, and they gave him the job anyway.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, he's doing the heavy lifting that they want done because they misleading the American public is the whole game. The more decentralized the information is, the harder it is to make an agreement that can rise up against things. Like, even look at now, the communism versus social democracy versus thing. If you're not a communist, it's not good enough. But communism is not really it doesn't really it's more of a philosophy than it is a actual system of governance. It's like what philosophy do you want to govern democracy with? It's not the same as you're not but if you won't say, hey, I'm a full-blooded communist now, people are like, oh, well, you're not one of us, you're not a serious person. And you're like, I don't even know where to start with that. I don't even know social, the socialism aspect of we should have better social programs, we should have the things that work together, and better workers' rights and across the board. And then they're like, no, everyone should own the means of production. And you're like, okay, so just if you wanted to get the maximum resistance against you imaginable, tell them you're going to take all their stuff. That is a great plan. If you just casually have better plans that sort of casually take their stuff, no one notices. You gotta be I don't like this analogy, but it's the one everyone uses, the boiling frog thing. Everyone's like, you gotta be the boiling frog and boil the frog slowly, and don't come out and tell the frog you're gonna eat it. You gotta heat the water up. Now, technically, by the way, I just want to point out, the frogs do jump out of the water. That's not a real thing. Frogs do not sit in the water and boil to death. They will jump out. Yeah, it's not. The pan gets too hot eventually, and they jump out. So that's not true. But it is a thing people say, and so it's a good way to explain an idea that you gotta sometimes a slow burn. But then people are like, well, if you're gonna have a slow burn, not a dramatic burn, then you're not serious about trying to make these changes. And you're like, no, dude, you just can't tell people. Why are you showing people your whole hand going into the poker game? You're just telling people. And then I realized, well, these all come from anonymous accounts. These are all people who drive more not radicalism, but it is radicalism, but it's not radicalism. It's irradicalism. No, it just basically makes it so that people can't agree with each other. And the more we can't agree because you're not one of us, the harder it is to overthrow, apparently, the secret pedophile ring that's running the world. So I guess everyone needs to take their own priorities into effect, but everyone's so wrapped up in their little culture war, whatever it is, that's the whole thing. And that's why we say the thing that they have us fighting a race war instead of a class war. But you could just call it a culture war. They have us fighting culture wars instead of fighting the class war, where all the classes should come together. We have this commonality. Instead, they have all these different communities with secret ways to turn everyone against each other. You can't, this person's not good enough for this. And that's kind of I feel and maybe there's something to that, actually, because there's the guy who wrote, he's probably an awful conservative at the end of his day, but he makes a good point. He's the guy who wrote Half Baked with what's his name? The black dude. That was actually hilarious.
Dave Chappelle?
Bad with trans rights. Yeah, Dave Chappelle. He wrote the guy that wrote Half Baked with him is this weenie looking white dude with glasses, but he's also a comedian. And he does this bit where he's explaining how you can't be left enough. There's no left enough. Someone leftism and lefty in general has such an absolutism that if I just said Dave Chappelle can be funny, that might be enough for some people to be like, oh my god, we gotta block Don, we gotta cancel Don. Don said, he's got these anti-trans issues, he went to Saudi Arabia, he's got all these problems. Don said he was funny, we should cancel him. That's someone will think that. And I don't think that feeling is organic. I think that as much as the right is being fed these ideas that they all agree on awful shit, so it's easy for them to find majorities and not have to fight with each other when they're a minority group, so they come together easier. I think the left's been fed this stuff mostly through anonymous accounts, and I've talked about this before, so I don't feel this is a new idea, to make it so that no one is ever good enough. No one is ever left enough. You can't have a leader on the left emerge. Look at AOC. AOC is not perfect. She's got problems. I have personal issues with her for my own personal
Why can't we all just have personal issues with other people? Why do we have to join together and like band together against that person if one person, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it's all about power on the left, because the people on the left don't have access to capital, so everyone's desperate for power, and they all think that the more power they get, the closer they get to capital. So it's more of like the left is like fighting against each other and racing with each other to get ahead, thinking that that advantage is going to make their life better. Because they have no access to capital. People on the right have tons of access to capital.
I don't feel like I have to agree with people like 100% of the time on things, you know?
Well,
like,
yeah, Jesse, but that's because you're you, and you're a lovely, sweethearted individual who's like literally amazing. So it's no surprise that you're like, I don't think we have to live that way, guys. Yes, say it louder, please.
I don't think we have to live that way, guys.
But it's illegitimate. It's illegitimate. So it just kind of comes back around to like this larger issue on how things are fed. And I really think that basically after these Epstein releases, I think that on the left we should have a lot less acceptance of anonymous accounts. Like people who operate anonymously, we don't know who they are, we don't know what's going on, and they say like volatile stuff all the time. Like we should be really looking at who those people are and why they're doing. And we had this happen during the Bernie movement. Like there's this communist account that I'm always like talking smack to be completely frank, because it was run by this guy before them. The new group took it over, but they're still the same thing. It was all funded by neoliberals. And the whole point was to just say shit that made everything that was like a normal, reasonable solution seem like just like liberal bullshit, right? So when I'm like, hey guys, you know, we need to kind of rally and get some voting happening, and they're like, well, voting won't change anything. Voting doesn't matter. And you're like, I'm pretty sure we just watched all these right-wing idiots get into power because they understand that voting matters. You know what I mean? Is voting going to solve everything right away? No, absolutely not. But will voting ultimately be the end goal and trying to change things and usurp power back towards a greater humane position? Yes, absolutely. Of course it will. It's be dumb not to think that. So people who are saying that, it's like, why are they saying that? Who are they? What's going on? Are these just right-wing provocateurs playing out as lefties all day? Because they seem to have access to capital, and what is one thing that lefties don't have? Access to capital. So if people seem like they have access to capital and they're pushing borderline right-wing narratives, so there's a good chance that that person, and we don't know who they are or what they're about, they're getting right-wing money to push right-wing narratives because they need us decentralized and, you know, working against each other just as much as they need their people working together.
It is disempowering, like, to just say, don't, you know, I'm not going to vote.
Yeah,
or don't vote.
It's the most ridiculous thing ever. Should
Why
at least
not
vote in congressional races? At least, like, you don't want to vote for president, you should at least be voting in congressional races. And I feel like we just had
go run yourself. Like,
yeah,
go run for something.
Well, we just had that huge upset in Texas the other night where he won a staggering amount of votes that mostly came from Republicans. And that woman who ran, I think he ran against a female Republican, I think, that person spent millions of dollars. They spent, I believe the numbers was like $2 million or something like that, and the other guy spent like $50,000. And more Republicans voted for. Like, it's a weird place to be in because it seems like if you can't get the lefties to organize, and this might have been something I thought of a long time ago, and now realize we're seeing it play out. If you can't get the lefties to organize because they won't vote, but the right will vote, you have to create such a toxic, horrible environment that even right-wingers won't vote for it. And that is where we are. Instead of getting the lefties to all work together and just work on it and make it work and make it happen, you have to get the people who will vote to everything just to be so awful that they won't vote for it anymore. And that's where we are. So voting is going to solve it. It just looks like it might not be voting from the left, which is very dangerous going into primary season because we need more left policies. So let's just say, for example,
but if they're voting for left candidates, that's not bad.
Well, hang on one second. So let's do a little logic chain here. So we need lefties voting in primaries, in a sense, almost more than the general election, the primaries happen sooner, because they're going to vote for people who support left policies. If we have the right wing ready to roll in a blue Congress because they're willing to vote for Democrats and vote against Republicans right now, then we're going to put Democrats into power. Sounds great. Well, it's not great if we put the wrong Democrats into power. And so if people aren't active right now and voting in primaries right now for the most left candidates so that they move on to the general election, whoever the right wingers then vote for to put into power are going to, and people are going to say things like, well, if we know the right wingers are going to vote for him, then we want more moderate candidates. No, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't fucking matter. No one's looking at their policies. It's just they're voting against Republican power. So this is the perfect opportunity to put lefties into power because the right is going to vote for them right now, regardless of policy, as long as they're not Republicans.
Policy would be icing on the cake, though.
Well, it'd be a lot better. I mean, it would suck to waste this opportunity and just put neoliberal assholes back into power who are just going to do because they're still voting for ICE, so they want to rein it in, not get rid of it. You're like, no, it needs to go, guys. It needs to go. It needs to go. Abolish ICE is now the moderate position. What's the more radical position? Oh, prosecute ICE is the radical position, which we should also do. And so it's sort of like, that's where we are. So it's a lot of food to think about, because I think the takeaway from all this Epstein stuff is what we're really up against, because the people who Epstein was a tool for are still around doing awful stuff. Those people haven't gone away and they haven't been held accountable. They're still doing awful stuff. So we can make a list of all the people doing awful things, and we could probably cut it down to 3 to 5 people to figure out who was actually pulling his strings the whole time. And who benefits the most from Americans losing their humanity towards each other. It's a question we should be asking. But I'll tell you who doesn't benefit: the American public. The people who we want to help, the people we're trying to protect, the disabled people, women, people of color. It just goes on. Those are the people that are not getting help through all this. So if we have to kind of at some point put things aside, because people are always talking about revolution. It's time for a revolution. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to have a revolution. Just having people vote in high numbers would be a fucking revolution. I know people think that sounds nuts, but when you have a third of your population not voting in your general election, if you could get half of those people to vote, it would be revolutionary.
And they don't vote because they don't think they have anything to vote for.
Yeah, which they don't. I don't blame them. Exactly.
We need to give them something to vote for.
Which is where it comes down to people who espouse left policies on the internet, every other month of the year, who try to push people into these extreme positions. Well, here's your chance to do something about it and to have something get better. But that's sort of the thing you realize, just like a lot of the long COVID treatment stuff and a lot of the things, the people who perpetuate this stuff don't benefit from things getting better. So there's no investments. Why don't people talk about Novavax helping them with long COVID? Because those long COVID groups are trying to seek funding for themselves to get paid to find the answer we already found. So they don't want people to know that there's an answer out there. They don't, because at the very least, that would mean we get the funding that they want. If it turned out that we knew the answer that they're claiming they're going to get paid to figure out, why would you pay them to figure it out? That puts us in direct conflict with these groups. But you got to be asking yourself at that point, who has what best interest in mind? Is it the people who are saying, hey, there are answers, we can help people, we need more answers? Or the people who are saying, there are no answers, please pay me to find answers? It's fucking disgusting how they've manipulated people into thinking to their own harm, some to their own death, that we don't have answers, that we can't at least get them down the right path, or at least start the process. It's obscene. These people don't care. You know what it is? We say long COVID advocates, and we should say long COVID recovery advocates. We are advocates for long COVID recovery. These people are advocating for just more long COVID. And that's, I think, the natural capitalistic edge, because, again, lefties don't have access to capital, so they have to find all these predatory means on the left to find access to capital, which ends up with the left being more predatory to each other than they are to the right. And that's where we are. Should be predatory to the right, and we shouldn't be predatory at all. In an ideal world, but we should be working more on how do we do it to affect the right and get into power and get into things of control. People are thinking about power on the micro scale. They're not thinking about power on the macro scale. Keep dropping this tool. Sorry, it's making a loud noise. So on that note, I think we should wrap it up. I believe Terry's already gone. Fun little. Oh, everyone's gone. It's just me, you, Jess.
And Heather.
And Heather. Hey, Heather. But so yeah, so this is a good time to wrap. Fun fact though, today I almost lost signal on my Wi-Fi, and so what I did is I put my hand around my Wi-Fi antenna. I turned myself into a receiver for a minute. But no drops, no things. So we're organized for better tomorrow. The show's Brace for Impact. We have a Discord. We do stuff. We do have an ACIP meeting come up. We were going to talk about it today, but we never got to it. Big little last minute push, by the way, Jess. I want to say this real fast. There are so many people who wanted BA32 to be a thing. There was this argument going on among the people who select variants, and I being one of them, that I had said that it's going to be LP81. It's going to be whatever comes after LP81 is going to be the next dominant variant. And that was XFG. I was 100% right. And all these people have been pushing BA32 because that was their horse in the race. That they're like, no, BA32 is going to take over. And that's going to become dominant. And it did kind of reach like 30% in some other countries that use different vaccines. But in America, because of the immune profiling we have, we're stuck on XFG. And the next variant will almost certainly be an XFG offshoot, which we will be updating. I will be advocating for updating Novavax this next time. It's going to be an XFG subvariant of some type. It's probably going to be a crossover of it's going to be XFG and something random like NB181 or something. Like it's so it was LP812 that became, or LP82. Can't remember if there's a 1 in there. It doesn't really matter. So we nailed it. What's that?
The NB1 is that? Are you talking about the NB181?
81, yeah, it was NB181 was the one that was like, well, is that going to do something? And so far it's been LP81, which is what we wrote in our proposal to the government when we were pushing for the things, and they did make the Novavax vaccine, the mRNA vaccines are LP81. Excuse me, I said that completely wrong. The mRNA vaccines are LP81, which does seem like it'd be a more dominant variant, and it would work better with XFG, but they're just not good vaccines. Like having LP81 and while trying to target XFG is actually a mistake, because these are variants that have direct immune evasion to each other. So this is why I said that the vaccines are less effective. And there was a paper that came out saying that the vaccine was 50% protective against hospitalization, which is garbage, by the way, just for the record, just against hospitalization. But they only measured for like 45 days after vaccination. So they're literally cut the study off as the vaccine would have started to wane. And guess who funded the study? Pfizer. So watch out for those dubious results. That did not work out the way they thought it would. They would have been better sticking with... it just would have been better doing something different. But we didn't know XFG was going to, like, that was the whole thing. So we didn't know XFG. And this is where what we should have done if if all this stuff wasn't in total disarray, is we should have gone back to the FDA at VRBPAC and push for XFG vaccines. But I think that's just what we're going to do this year. So I have a red bar. That's the end of it. Jesse, anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, that's it. I put our last show up on Upscrolled, so hopefully somebody sees it over there.
Oh, I totally forgot to share the call to our different chats and things. I probably should have done that. We have a chat for people who want to be notified when we do a call, so we're not always on the exact best timing. And so that's there for you too. So that's it. We're out of here. I'll see you guys when I see you. Thank you for listening. Have a good one. We'll be